Welcome to Best in Class. My name is AJ Madden. I have the honor and privilege of helping individuals and organizations become best in class at what they do. Today, we have a very special guest. I was looking forward to this episode as much, if not more, than any episode I've ever done. Um, Craig Douglas is here, aka SouthNarc. He's the founder of ShivWorks. Craig retired from law enforcement after 21 years of service, with most of his career spent in narcotics and SWAT. Since 2003, Craig provides instruction globally under the ShivWorks brand, and has conducted coursework on entangled shooting skills in 49 states, 9 foreign countries, with special operations units and all branches of the military, as well as federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, and holds a small contract within the intel community organized under the Department of Defense. Craig Douglas, welcome to Best in Class. It is an honor to have you here, sir.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you for allowing me to interact with your audience, and I'm looking forward to where this goes, sir.
Oh, excellent. Well, Craig is a world class expert um, in self protection in all aspects of it. I consider Craig for sure on the Mount Rushmore of self protection experts, and quite possibly the Michael Jordan of the field. And I don't say that lightly. I've trained for around 20 years in mixed martial arts and self protection, and I'm always looking for that one expert who really can make the complex simple for us to understand and do in the worst case scenarios of our life. And Craig is that man. He's the man for the job for sure. I also find Craig to be a great expert on life and leadership as well. I've learned some really great things in terms of living a better life, being a better human being, being a better leader, and maybe that's where we'll start, Craig. Can you talk about the good dude barometer? One of my favorite things I've learned from you.
So the good dude barometer is a metric for assessing how much you trust someone, how much you're going to invest in someone, and it's pretty simple. You know, if I have a friend or even an acquaintance who I trust and I respect and I like, he's a good dude, right? And we're talking, and I ask him about someone. Hey, do you know AJ Madden? That's a good dude. That's all I need to hear. That's all I need to hear. AJ, you have passed the good dude barometer. I don't really need to check you out. I don't really need to, vet you or anything like that. If my good dude network is truly robust and we have the right people, maybe not even the best people, but the right people. And the network is resilient and it's robust and it's thriving and it works, then that's really all I need to hear. And it's interesting, especially in the tactical community, which can be very hierarchical and quite judgmental when it comes to skill. We're teaching skills, techniques, tactics, knowledge that may mean the difference between whether someone comes home or not. So most of the people who do teach, if there's one thing that's common, is they generally do take the mission very seriously. I think most people that are teaching self-defense skills, self-protection skills, absolutely do understand the gravity. There are some that don't. There are some that, still really don't get it. But for the most part, I think our community does understand the gravity of the knowledge transfer. So we look at each other. It can be very like nitpicky, and it can be very judgmental when you're assessing someone's competence. And people check each other out. Is that guy who he says he is he actually legitimate? Is his content current? And there's a constant kind of assessment, vetting, arguably infighting in the tactical self-protection, self-defense community. But the people that do like and respect each other, again, if I get good dude from a good dude, that's really all I need to hear. You know, it's probably one of the oldest forms of campfire legitimacy, when we're all around the campfire and we're sharing this moment, and I ask about someone, and that person, because they're in my campfire, they say, yeah, he's a good dude. That's really all I need to hear. So you compare that to in our community, when someone were to ask me perhaps about you, hey, do you know AJ Madden? And I say, yeah, I know him. So the difference between yeah, I know him and the good dude, when you have a functional good dude network, that's profound. That's profound. The unsaid is as holds as much gravity as the said. So that's kind of what we do, and at least in the circles that I run in and the communities that I foster and I am part of, and provide some even some consigliere duties too, especially with a younger generation than me. The good dude barometer is still in this day and age surprisingly effective, provided that you have the right people in the network and the network is resilient and robust.
I love the concept of the network as well. I mean, I love the good dude barometer concept. It makes, for the rest of my life, I want to, when my name comes up, I want people to say that. I want to earn that good dude title
Yeah.
because it can't be bought, it can only be earned. And it seems to me through, two key aspects: giving 100%, 100% of the time at everything you do, and being kind and useful to others. It seems to me that's, in my mind, that's how I would maybe earn that good dude title. Again, it's earned every day. It's I got to re-earn that every day. So it really does give me a good life goal to have that, just to earn it. Just to earn it, not for pat myself on the back, but to just do the things I have to do to earn that title. Also, the network of good dudes. I mean, the old saying, we become who we surround ourselves with most. When you're surrounded by good dudes, people are giving their best and kind of useful to others. That's just a great way to elevate our life. And I love you've talked about a vetting process as well. It was another note I had. The best way to vet an instructor, and I really think just any expert in general, could be a doctor, it could be your mechanic, any paid expert, a lawyer, a martial arts instructor. You talked about getting the word of mouth from trusted sources. That's how you vet someone a paid expert. Can you talk about that, just what that is? I mean, I guess you kind of did talk about it, but just word of mouth from trusted sources.
I think that's the main thing. How do you? So here's a good example. How does someone who has experienced a traumatic event in and around violence, let's say a person were mugged at gunpoint, and it was visceral, maybe they were beat up, and they tell themselves, I I want to learn how to protect myself. I don't want that to ever happen again. How does a person who lived a good life, has no experience with violence, didn't come from a broken home or some kind of dysfunctional upbringing, how do they choose a reliable self-defense instructor? How do they do that? What does that look like? That's really, I think, a vetting process. How do you vet people, especially when you don't know what you're looking at and what you're looking for? What is a vet? I think if you're familiar with the content, vetting is easier. But if you're unfamiliar with the content, then vetting gets much harder. So, how do you do that? So, in an information age, we have certainly more a preponderance of information that we just didn't have 30 years ago. The ease of access to information, but still, How do you trust it? How do you know it's reliable? How do you know it's real? And I think um, this is one of the reasons that I think long form stuff like this is so important. I think long form communication, and more importantly, a person, a figure of authority, an instructor, somebody you're going to invest money with, are they willing to put themselves out there for extended periods of time, an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, and answer a variety of questions, regarding the topic itself, things in and around the topic? You may find when you're deciding to select someone like a self-defense instructor, their information as far as self-defense may appear to be sound, but maybe there's something about their personality that's off-putting, or there's something about their character that comes across in the time that they're speaking as, you know, more desirable, less desirable. But I think the ability for us to get information, if you put the work in, if you're not, I think that's a big part of it too. I think it's a garbage in, garbage out. If you're a person that's not willing to sit down and listen to someone for an hour and a half or 2 hours talk and really and be focused too, not just put it on your phone and do things around the house. Literally sit there like we used to do with books and watch someone uninterrupted and give them all of your focus. That's quite an expenditure, but I think it's actually pretty easy compared to 30 years ago to vet people and to gather information like that. I think it's easier actually than it's ever been, provided the end user does their part. I think you can gather a lot of good information quite easily. But again, someone's willingness to sit down and just talk, and you know, I'm willing to talk. Certainly, I tend to be. I'll go off. I'll go down weird rabbit holes, and I'll critique myself. I'm like, I don't know if I answered that guy's question. But here's the thing: what moments like this, where essentially where none of this is going to be edited. I don't assume any of it is. We'll plug and play it, and I just send it out there. I do lives like this all the time, and I'm comfortable with making mistakes too. But I think in my willingness to do that, my willingness to have a spotlight put on me as an instructor, willing as a person, willing to have a spotlight put on them like that. I think the does a source for information, knowledge, or whatever. In it could be a self-defense guy or a doctor, um, a guy you invest money with. Are they willing to allow themselves to be spotlighted and engage in some fairly in the moment, unexpected public vulnerability? If I'm willing to answer questions and be comfortable with my answers, whether they please everyone or they don't. I think that's part of building, trust in people is just being an authentic person. And that's going to mean you're not going to please everybody, and you're going to say things that upset some people, and you're going to say things that make other people, exalt you. But still in all, being authentic and engaging in vulnerability and being willing to make a mistake publicly and misspeak. Yeah, I think I think when you put yourself out there for two hours and just go and send that out into the world, to me that's what I look for when I'm vetting anyone. When I'm vetting, I'm still suffering from an ailment that is either related to the COVID vaccine or long COVID. We don't know, and it ebbs and flows. I have no official diagnosis or prognosis, but I've been suffering from this for 4 years, and medicine 2.0, so far, a lot of people have just done this. So I've found some things. I can't, I still haven't figured out what the mechanism is that sends me into a descent of months long illness. However, I've figured out a way to avert it. And the way I've done that is by sitting down and listening to people who I think might have a solution for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, and doing that quite a bit. And that's actually given me at least a way to, when I feel this descent into long-term sickness, do some things that keep me from falling off the precipice.
Well, one, sorry to hear about this long-term ailment, illness. Number two, what a great lesson for all of us in terms of taking responsibility for our life and our health, however we need to do that by sitting down for hours and researching and not just throwing in the towel, uh, being proactive. Again, I go back to just taking 100% responsibility for our health and seeking out those true experts who can help us because, it sounds like what you're going through, it'd be easy to throw in the towel sometimes. You know what? I'm just going to, which makes me sad to think about. And you're a great example of just doing the opposite, of taking that full responsibility for your health, and just apply that to anything in life. Your health, your career, your relationships. Do what Craig does. Go out and find the true experts. First, take responsibility, and then go out and find the experts who have the answer to your challenge. Um, you also touched on something, and I've heard you talk about this before. I've never heard someone talk about this the way you have, and this applies 100% to leadership. You describe it in terms of being a great coach, being a great trainer, teacher. Be likable. Try to be likable. That 100% applies to leadership, whether you're a school teacher, a sports coach, a CEO, a police chief. Try to be likable. Try to connect with people. It's going to make the people who choose to follow you and listen to you, it's going to make their experience just that much more enjoyable. It's going to reduce their stress. And there'll be that connection there where you can share something useful for them, where if they didn't like you, they might not hear it as well. What are the keys, would you say, to being likable, just in general, as a leader, as a coach, as a trainer? What's your definition of likable, and how can we increase our likability?
I think really connection is the key element to likability. And I think connection is I think connection is the root of likability. So what do you have to connect with an individual or a group? Well, they have to feel like you're listening to them. Are you listening to them? Are you paying attention to them? Are you hearing them? That's a common phrase now, is I feel heard, I feel seen. We hear that quite often in various modalities of like emotional health. We'll hear that kind of stuff. Hear that kind of stuff in therapy. So, what is how does a person feel heard and feel seen? Well, they have to connect with another person. They have to that connection is the root of. So, for example, and specific ways to do that. We've discussed this previously. Things that we do that I demand that that ShivWorks, our brand of training and products that we do when we teach, is we learn everyone's name. We learn every single person's name in the room. We do, and we'll have classes on the weekends that are 24 people, and it's Brian and I, and it starts on Saturday morning and it ends on Sunday evening. We have two 20-hour days. and we do this 40 weeks a year. And at the end of that, we have 20 hours total, two 10-hour days. And at the end of that period of time, I want to be able to go around the room and ask every single person, calling them by name, hey, John, Bill, Mary, Jane, thoughts on the weekend, get their thoughts, give them time to speak, and then thank them. So I think trying to cultivate likability is first and foremost about creating connection with another human being or a group. And the biggest part of connection is, do they feel like you're listening, and are you listening, and do they feel like they're seen? That doesn't mean that we necessarily cater to the individual as a priority over the transfer of knowledge or the product itself. The mission still comes first, and you'll get people who really, a friend of mine, one of my strength coaches, calls them hostage takers. You know, he's a guy, Winston. He's big, stocky, very intimidating. Well, he's close to 40 now. Black guy. He's about 5 feet square. He warms up with 3 plates on a bench, and Winston looks like incredibly intimidating, but he's not. And people, because he looks the way he is, and he's easy to be around, people will like harness him and grab him. So he calls those people that want him exclusively and want to keep that feedback mechanism going because it feels good. He calls them hostage takers. So you'll get hostage takers, people that the person in a group or class, the same person, when you maybe shift from a topic and you segue with, are there any questions? And it's always going to be the same person that asks, with the exception of that, catering to that person, making it about them versus making it about the group. And I think that's also a big thing about being able to toggle between individual connection and group connection. If that's just a one-on-one, then obviously, sure, that person has you hostage. You're their hostage until you're done. That's what they're paying for, right? But if it's a group connection, it's a group dynamic, that's a little trickier because you have to toggle between individual and group connection. But I think making sure that people feel seen and making sure people feel heard and they're attended to, not just seen and heard. How do you make a person feel heard? Well, I think you call them by their name. That's a big part. Hey, sir, could I ask you a question? Sure, John. And he's surprised maybe after 20 minutes that you called him by name in a group of 8 people, right? I have 8 people in 10 minutes. Can I have everybody's name? And when they ask questions, can I say, Bill, that's a great question. It's startling to a lot of people. So, wow, that guy's been here 10 minutes and he knows everybody's name. He's actually listening to me. So if I have that connection now, I'm probably on the road towards likability more. And I think I'd like to be liked and respected. And if I had to choose one over the other, I'd hedge towards being respected over liked. I don't want to be unlikable, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I don't know if I went over this with you. In my law enforcement career, I had I kind of figured this out, 4 categories of people. The fewest number of people were those I liked and respected.
Hmm.
A smaller number, a bigger number but not much more were those I respected but didn't really like. There were a much larger group of people who I liked but didn't respect. And then finally, probably below that, there were a fairly large number of people that I neither liked nor respected. And I think that's it right there. I don't want to sacrifice my respect just to be liked. And I would prefer to hedge being I'd absolutely like to be. I would prefer if I can be liked and respected. I think that's when you know you're in the zone. I think that most people are probably, unless you're really good, I think most people are probably liked and not really respected. I think that's where most, I think, and I think if you're doing, I think if you're good at what you do and you're working hard to actually help this person, satisfy this person, whatever it is, I think the chances of you being liked are higher. And there's some people that are just not going to like me, right? There's some people that are just not going to like me. Some people will not like me because I'm a middle-aged white guy. That's bottom line, regardless of whether they had a good time in a ShivWorks class or not. We have a really interesting broad swath of people on the political spectrum. We have fairly right people, we have fairly left people, and what's interesting is to see people who are all over the map politically and socially come together and work towards a common goal for the weekend, which is dealing with a simulated absolute worst day of your life. What does that look like? When we strip away everything, what does it look like when everyone, regardless of their beliefs, are just naked and afraid? And we simulate that very well. We do. We simulate that. We have visceral reactions, visceral, human, raw, uncomfortable to watch reactions that are very public. Everybody sees it, and it's interesting to watch how even people who are absolutely polar opposites, a 70-year-old guy from North Alabama with, a 24-year-old trans person from Portland, Oregon. To watch those two at the end of that weekend long experience talking to each other, that's a start, right? That's a start, because they have that shared experience. They have that shared public vulnerability. I think those two can at least start looking at each other different. And, they may not like each other, but they respect what each other did. And at least they're on the road towards being liked a little bit more.
Man, is that powerful? I love how you describe that liked and respected matrix. That 4x4, you can be liked and respected, you can be disliked and respected. I never heard it put that way. That is excellent. Our definition of best in class is 100% commitment to excellence and service in everything you do. And as I listen to you talk, I envision, well, how do you be liked? Well, be kind and useful to others, serve others. Well, how do you be respected? Well, be excellent. Give 100%, 100% of their time. And I challenge everyone listening is to think about that. Everyone as Craig described it, people you like and respect, like and respect, like or respect, and think about those people. And what is it that 1%, as Craig described it, of people you both like and respect, what are they doing different than everyone else? Uh, and most likely you'll see that they're 100% committed to excellence and also 100% committed in everything you do. And look at those people and say, how can I be more like them? I think that's a challenge. And you gave me something to think about as well in that area in particular. Uh, as we talked about, Craig's a world class expert in self protection. I think he's the world class expert. If you want to see more of what he does, there's a ton of great footage on YouTube. So you can really understand exactly what Craig's talking about in terms of the worst, simulating the worst moments of your life and the vulnerability that you would feel going through this and what you'll learn from it. Some great places on YouTube, and I'll put links in the description. The ShivWorks channel is excellent. That's Craig's channel. There's some really good videos on the Warrior Poet Society channel, as well as the Hard to Hurt channel, where you can really get an understanding of what Craig's talking about. And you can really learn some good things that can potentially save your life. Um, I have Craig's Managing Unknown Contacts online course, which is outstanding. It's the best one I've ever seen in this realm by far in 20 years. I'm not just saying that to be nice. Craig's not paying me. I just want more people to watch this because I know it can, potentially save their life. Um, in terms of managing unknown contacts, now Craig also teaches this in his in-person live seminars, and he's got it online as well, an online course. Craig, what are two or three key tips you could give us today that someone could apply today from your managing unknown contacts concept
So
methodology?
that's a great question. What can I give a person that's immediately actionable? Well, violence tends to happen up close. And one of the things we want to try and do is see potential problems arising as early and as far away as possible. So we have time to be able to choose to stand our ground, escape, run off, call the police or whatever. So, thinking about having as much distance as possible. How do we do that? The first thing I would say is we should avoid task fixation, and I'll explain those terms in a moment, and task saturation in public places where we don't control the occupancy. Who's there? Specifically, places that might have a higher probability of a crime against a person than another, such as a parking garage, a gas station, a transitional area, you know, avoiding task fixation and task saturation. So, what do I mean by task fixation? Being hyper focused on a thing to the exclusion of the rest of the environment. We do this with ourselves more often than not these days with our phones. How many times have you seen or been a person in public focused, fixated on your phone, either in a text message or an email or what? And if you think about that person's field of vision specifically, if we thought about vision as being in a constant state of flux, I can have a broad field of vision or I can have a narrow field of vision. Obviously, a broader field of vision will allow me to see more and potentially see things earlier. So if my nose is in my phone, I'm literally looking through a drinking straw at the world, and I'm not going to see anything but the screen. So the chances of you seeing something early are reduced significantly. Task saturation, doing too many things at one time. So think about, I don't know, maybe a mother with an infant and a diaper bag, and she's got a car seat with buckles and all kinds of doodads and widgets. that she's trying to work this into, maybe as 2 or 3 bags of groceries are hanging off her other arm, and she's got a phone pinched between her shoulder and her ear. All that stuff. There's so many tasks. She is saturated with tasks. Again, she's not going to be able to see or hear anything coming before it's right on top of her. So, what we try and tell people is reduce the number of things that you're doing on your way to your car, specifically, or on your way into a place of business or your home, and don't hyper focus on something like your phone. Put that away, put it in your pocket. That will allow you to keep your field of vision broader and open, and give you the more ability to see something coming much earlier and have much more time to deal with that. That would be the very first thing I would tell anyone.
Oh, excellent. Okay. That's foundational. That's the foundation. I know the word, avoidance, awareness, avoidance gets thrown around a lot, you know, in the self protection field, but that is very precise and prescriptive. Um, what would you say? What would be maybe one tip you would give them in terms of how to deal with it if it had to get physical, um, or how to avoid it? You teach some great skills, some specific skills in the course. What's one thing they could do physically?
I think one thing they can do physically to avoid a problem is, I think this is binary, so I'll break it down 2 ways. I think, first of all, is understanding the difference between an invitation and a boundary, which no one does. So if I'm in a dingy place, and let's say I do have a good broad field of awareness. My nose is not in my phone. I'm not doing too many things at one time, and I see a person directly moving towards me. It's directed encroachment, and I'm not sure what their intentions are. Could be hostile, could be benign. I don't know. I'm not making any kind of assessment based on how they look. I will assess their threat potential based on very specific behavior that we teach people. However, the problem is if I let this person get too close, then specifically to average conversational distance, which is wingspan, then my chances of mitigating someone assaulting me first are pretty much zero. So I need to keep them a little bit further away than what is the social norm for verbal interaction or a conversation. So the first thing is speaking early. And when we speak, typically to a stranger, we will say something. Most people in this circumstances will say something like, "Can I help you? What's up? What's going on? What do you need?" And all of those things are invitations. They're not boundaries. And they tend to invite people into average conversational distance, which is wingspan, which is the hot zone for, if he moves first, your chances of mitigating that. And we can show this empirically very easily. We do in managing unknown contacts. We do a physical drill that shows the implications of wingspan and why that's an unmanageable range. So getting people to understand that normal human interaction is to invite someone into a conversation. We want to make a conscious shift from offering invitations into setting boundaries. So, what does a verbal boundary look like to a stranger that you're not sure what their intentions are, but the environment we're in at the moment certainly is conducive to a crime against a person? So, we're in a nebulous gray place. How do we make a good decision? So, we offer the idea of a soft verbal boundary that we frame as a request that's clear that we don't want this person coming any closer to us. And in a way, that's authentic to the person proffering the boundary. So for me, that might look like this. Hey, sir, can you hold up for a second? So it's an ask. It's an ask. I'm not inviting this person in. I don't raise my voice. My facial expressions are open, and it is a boundary. Now, that can be off-putting to some people, but a lot of people will, most people actually will respect that. They will. They'll honor that. They may be a bit taken aback, but because people are used to being invited in, and they're used to being invited into average conversational distance, which is literal wingspan. And it's wingspan in the Western world. Scandinavia, it's a little bit further away. Other places, it's way closer. Any place in the Middle East or Asia, the spatial norms are much, much more compressed. And that's problematic from the standpoint of managing violence and managing someone seizing initiatives. So a simple thing like understanding the difference verbally between an invitation and a boundary, and being willing to set a soft verbal boundary with someone that you do see approaching you in a sketchy place, and saying something like, hey, sir, ma'am, could you hold up for a second? And once they stop, then you can elect whether you get into a conversation with someone. What you don't want to do is get into a conversation with another human as distance is closing. So in the very early stages of an encroachment problem in a sketchy place, we think about everything verbal from me to them as monologue. If we're going to get into dialogue, if we're going to have a conversation, and I'm not just going to talk at this person, that person is going to stop moving towards me first. And it's a really important distinction, because this is how people just get right up on top of you or come out of nowhere. That's not true. Here's the reality, especially when you watch video, they close with you under the veil or the fog of language. Language is literally a smoke screen for movement. It's very subtle, and it's very, very insidious. And unless you actually understand what's happening and really look at why it's happening, this is how people get taken every day.
I've everything you've talked about, I've experienced personally, and I can just tell everyone listening, it's 100% accurate. And I think being able to set those verbal boundaries has potentially saved my life a few times. It's at least saved me from, great bodily harm. Doing some security work, close protection work, uh, and it works when you learn to set those verbal boundaries. And it takes practice, and it's also something you could practice in your everyday life, for sure. I mean, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Now, Craig really breaks it down well in the course. The online course, I recommend everyone get it. For the value you get, it is very affordable. And it can absolutely be life saving. It'll definitely be life changing. Your paradigm will shift towards the world. And it's a skill I believe everyone should learn. Every man, woman, and child should learn this. So if you're a parent, you can learn it and also share it with your kids. Um, I think it's just an invaluable life skill as Craig teaches it. Um, in terms of training, Craig, what would you recommend is a minimum effective dosage for someone watching this in terms of strength, conditioning, and self protection training in a week? Just an example, maybe 2 days a week of full body tactical strength training, 2 days a week of cardio, and 2 days a week of maybe mixed martial arts training or Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. What would you recommend, outside of going to your seminars? What would you recommend people do in between that or to prepare for your seminar?
I think the first part of that would be just preparing for the the struggle of life, and I think having a healthy body, whether somebody chooses to get into the specifics of self-defense, I think first and foremost, across the board, the most important thing is going to be physical health. So, a strong heart, I think absolutely that long, slow distance zone two cardio. I think the recommended to make adaptations to stroke volume, there I think the latest literature is probably, 4, maybe even 5 days a week, but just maintaining a good healthy stroke volume and a good lower resting heart rate. I think once you get to where you want, probably 2 days of zone two cardio, 60 to 90 minutes at a session. That's a lot for a lot of people, but you can break that up, I think, but I think having a healthy heart, because so many people, and it's interesting to listen to people like Peter Attia talk about, we pretty much know everything regarding heart disease as far as what causes it, how to fix it, how to remediate it. We don't have that with cancer. So, when we look at, I think cardio is going to be the first thing as far as the battle for life. I think cardio is the most important thing. I would put strength and mobility as an equal second, because especially as you age, things like strength and bone density directly relate to your resiliency and your quality of life. So I think strength training is very important, and I think that can be done. I think once you get a baseline of strength, that can be maintained pretty easily, probably 2 days a week at a minimum. And then as far as learning to protect yourself, I think, and these are I would say these are maintenance level things. You may be in deficit in one or the other and may need to spend more time in one or the other for a period of time and prioritize one. But I think kind of like you laid it out, two and two, I think that's actually pretty good. I do stuff that's pretty much what I do, especially when I work, and I may not be able to get as much cardio because I'm flying out that day. So, I want to get an hour's more sleep. So I'm going to get 45 minutes versus 90 minutes of cardio because I've got a fairly early flight. And I don't want to get up at, 2 a.m. I'm going to get up at 3:30 a.m. So I'm going to sleep in a little bit more. I'm going to prioritize sleep, or the cardio. That kind of stuff. You'll always have to make compromises, but that's actually a fairly common working. I try and do something physical every day. I'm probably not going to do strength or conditioning on the same day that I used to. But at 57 now, it's a little too much, neurologically and systemically. My systemic fatigue will, if I do strength and conditioning and a hard either MMA or BJJ session, it will fry me neurologically. A younger person,
Yeah.
they can probably do that, but as I'm closing on 60, that's much harder to do. So I will either do S&C or I will do combat sports, one or two. But I like that two and two. I think that would be a and as far as a minimum goes, you can when you've got a deep base of any of these things, you can let some things lapse. I don't think Brian Frias, who is the second half of ShivWorks, I think if Brian didn't train for 2 months in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or MMA or grappling or anything else, I don't think Brian's going to lose a close range confrontation because of his lack of physical skill, because he's got so much physical skill that it's going to take a lot for that guy to degrade because he's so overlearned. in it. Now, eventually, at some point, age will catch up with him, but at the same time, um, yeah, I think it would take a lot. So I like as deep a base, and I tend to toggle between these things. I'll spend more time in cardio for a while and let the other two kind of go, and I'll spend more time in strength for a little while. I'll spend more time in technical skill building, and I'm never. I don't think anybody ever reaches parity in these areas. I think we're always a little tiered when comparing.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, I'm glad you like the 2-2-2 split. I mean, your
Yeah.
expertise is greater than mine. Craig's a very high level grappler. You're a black belt in BJJ.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's top of the food chain for everyone listening. So Craig is elite there. And he also really, in case you can't tell, really prioritizes his strength and conditioning work, on top of traveling for a living, literally all over the world. So if he can do it, we can all do it, number one. Number two, I love your advice on seeing where you need more work. So anyone who's listening, if you're doing mixed martial arts twice a week and lifting weights 4 days a week, but neglecting the zone two and the heart work, well, start focusing on that more. I love that you mentioned Peter Attia, also one of my favorite experts. Definitely have learned a lot from him in terms of health and fitness. Again, something for everyone to shoot for, and there's a minimum effective dosage to this. And what Craig's talking about, I think, is 30 to 60 minutes a day on each one of those things, whether it's a conditioning day, a strength day, or an MMA day. We're not talking about 3 hours a day of training 6 days a week. We're talking about we don't have to become a bodybuilder or run a marathon or become a professional fighter. There is a minimum effective dosage to this, 30, 60, maybe 90 minutes at the most a day. It's all doable. And again, I love how you put in terms of the heart. Um, you said cardio is the most important thing in the battle for life. Never heard it put that way. There's one of the quotes of the year on the podcast. And it's just, again, so crucial to be able to protect yourself. And again, I love how you put physical fitness as a pillar of self protection, which most people don't think about. The strength and conditioning work. I mean, make yourself harder to kill by
Yeah.
being stronger and fitter overall. Let's see. Here's a concept I love from Craig. Again, one of my all-time favorite quotes. Craig said, "Dress is a way to execute excellence." Dressing well is just a way to practice excellence in your life, which is just how you do one thing is how you do everything. How you do anything is how you do everything, and that's what Craig, I think, is talking about. Can you expand on that? How dressing well is just an opportunity to practice excellence in your life?
It's interesting. So I've always dressed to effect. When I was working undercover, I would dress, and I'm buying crack cocaine and housing projects. So it was common for me to have a redneck mullet, a double dangly earring, a nipple ring, a sleeveless, dirty t-shirt, ugly, baggy jeans, be unbathed and smell like malt liquor and Newport cigarettes. I mean, when I rolled up on a corner in a housing project, I smelled like a crackhead, and my clothes were like, yeah, he's hood rat trash. He's here chasing dope. Um, the other side of that was interesting because I started getting into dressing better initially as a way to make myself competitive for rising in rank in the sheriff's department. We as we moved towards lieutenant and captain, those ranks, you had interviews with like the civil service board. So I was like, I need to wear a suit to that interview. I need to know what that looks like. I don't wear suits that often, maybe funerals. I've got a black suit somewhere. Maybe it fits. But I decided to make a concerted effort just to make myself more competitive. And I got a suit, and it didn't fit well. It was awful. But the fact that I wore a suit was noted by the people with the Civil Service Board, and actually that was one of the factors that edged me away from the other applicants and me getting promoted to captain. And then shortly after that, I had a funeral I had to go to, and I needed a black suit. And I started doing a little bit more research, started reading, and got on styleforum.net and was introduced to the world of fashion and style, and there are different things. And then started getting some of the really doing a deep dive on it, just having fun with it, and then getting into the work of Alan Flusser, Dressing the Man, Styling the Man, those books, and really looking at that science, actually art and science of dressing well, proportion, scale, pattern, fit, all of it, and it's just really really interesting. And went down the rabbit hole there. I had an occasion to, when I retired, unfortunately, have my retirement rescinded, and I had to come back to work. And the sheriff's department didn't have a place for me, so I went to work for the county part time. And they worked it around ShivWorks in my training schedule. They had actually held a lot of liability, so they went out of their way to let me work for another 7 months so I could invest in the retirement system and get my retirement check coming in. There's a big debacle between me and the state retirement system and my agency that eventually, after 3 years, went into my favor. However, I had to come back to work, and I worked for the county and the public relations department of all places. And I didn't really have anything to do. It was just a place for the county to stick me. However, um, what it allowed me to do was practice dressing. And I would dress exceptionally well because I'm in the public eye and I'm doing things for county government and I'm interacting with people, I'm interacting with the press. So it allowed me to uh, exercise a creative muscle and, try suiting, odd jackets and trousers, jeans and jackets, and then really dialing. Spent a fair bit of money doing this. I was having fun, but I learned a lot. And what was interesting about it was the effect that would have on people. Here's one I'll never forget. It was a Monday, and it was the beginning of the month, and there was a meeting of county government. And I was in the board meeting, and on Monday, typically, I, especially like for that, I would wear a nice suit and nice shoes and a tie, uh, pocket square, cufflinks at times, just depending on what I wanted to do. And I remember coming out of that meeting, and there was something contentious. I think it was the county, it was the county animal shelter. It was a real contentious issue with some animal rights people, and they had a big scene outside of the courthouse, probably like 30 people. There's a lot of the press there, and there were some new people with one of the local television stations. And when we came out, they started. I'm right next to the chairman of the board of supervisors, who's the highest person on the board of five for county government, and a new local television person came, looked at both of us, and put a mic right in my face and started asking me questions about county government. And she did that based on how I looked. There's no doubt. Now, there are other things about how I look besides my clothes, right? There's my posture, there's my gait, but still in all, based on how I look, there's an assessment that she made that I'm the one in charge. So that was a significant moment to me. So I always understood that from playing the part as a crackhead or working a dance club and buying ecstasy. You have to look the part, right? But I didn't really translate that over towards just everyday life. And that period of time where I was able to exercise that creative muscle and build that effect, it's profound, dressing um, smart, to use the British word, right? Smartly dressed. You know, it's a common thing you hear in the UK. Smartly dressed. I that people react differently. They do in all kinds of situations, and I think smart dressing is excellent social lubricant that can facilitate whatever the end state is. I really do.
And it can be the key difference as you describe it in terms of achieving a goal or dream career or a dream relationship or just paying attention to that detail.
I agree. I do it, and I have to admit, you know, I will see if I see a young man and he's smartly dressed, but his shoes are not shined. I'm like, dude, almost there. You're not really, not really quite doing it right. And what does that tell you, right, about a person? If I see a guy who's smartly dressed, he's trying, but his either his knowledge base isn't enough. He hasn't put it together. Um, so or he's just not detail oriented. You know, great suit, shoes aren't shined. You know, awesome. You know, your jacket's too short. It's ill fitting. It's too tight. It's too loose. Actually, you're wearing a 44 regular, and you should be in a 42 regular. You look like you're wearing your dad's clothes, but you're wearing a suit. That kind of thing. You know, I think those are lost skills. I think there's something about. I think there's a period of time, and it may have been when Silicon Valley rose in prominence and just the workplace got got more casual. But this whole idea that I don't care how I look, I think that slovenly thing, and like is commonly said, and we've said, how you do a thing is how you do everything. So, or is it? I don't know. You know, certainly those Silicon Valley guys are brilliant in their execution. They're missing that. Um, and I don't judge people strictly by appearance. I certainly don't. You shouldn't do that. However, I think first impressions are important, and I like to hedge to my benefit. So I think it's a skill. I think it's a way to. I really do think it's a way to practice excellent, perfect technical execution. I think a I think a man getting dressed in the morning. Did you ever see the this is an old movie, The Pope of Greenwich Village? Do you remember
No.
that movie? So it's a movie, I think it's a Scorsese movie, but in the very beginning of the movie, it's got a young Mickey Rourke in it before he got weird looking. And in the movie, he's getting dressed. In the background, Sinatra's playing The Summer Wind. But the way he's getting dressed, it's very, very, very intentional. You know, the way he straightens and gets a dimple in the perfect dimple in a Windsor knot tie. The way he's actually straightening and aligning, you know, the placket of his shirt with the edge of his buckle and the fly, a classic gig line in military parlance, you know, military language. The way he does that, the way he folds his dress shirt so there's an even line. Just like to me, a guy getting dressed like that to that level of precision is almost like it's like a male tea ceremony. You know, it's just a patterning and routine of excellence and perfect technical execution. It's how I envision our grandfathers getting ready for work.
That's right. Well said. Yeah, that's a good visual. I
Yeah,
could see that as well.
yeah,
Yeah, I like that visual. And yeah, to your point, first impressions are, according to good science and good studies, crucial. First impressions are important, and most of it is how we look. They say you get two chances to make a first impression. One is how you look, and second is when you open your mouth.
Right.
which Craig has taught us both today in terms of how you look, and then also what to say when you open your mouth. Uh, Managing unknown contacts. But it's whether we like it or not, first impressions are important, and appearance is a crucial part of
Yeah.
that. Most people are not going to give us that second chance. Like Craig said earlier, he said he tries not to judge people by their appearance, which I think that is a good way to think about life in the world. I like that. And most people don't have the time to really go below the surface because life. So why not, as Craig said, hedge our bets and give a great effort there in terms of our appearance. Um, it's I love that you talk about the details as well. Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's trainer, would talk about how the separation is in the details.
Yeah.
That's what separates the best from the rest. And he would talk about how Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan were so detail oriented in all areas of their life. And that was a real separator to them. And that may be shining your shoes or having the right fitted clothes. Um, I also like the concept of look good, feel good. It's, in psychology, they call it embodied cognition. So again, there's good studies on this that when you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you generally do good. I think there's a virtuous cycle to looking your best. And overall, the principle I love the most out of all this that Craig talked about is just practicing excellence. It's just an opportunity to practice excellence in your life. Just like when Craig talks about doing zone 2 cardio a few days a week, that's also an opportunity to practice excellence. Going to one of Craig's seminars, just an opportunity to practice excellence in your life. And I really think that ShivWorks is just, this is my impression, it's just an extension of Craig practicing excellence and service at the highest level because the training is so reality based and so results driven and so precise in its effectiveness. That's just an opportunity to practice excellence, doing the work, with Craig. And also Craig's trying to serve us at the highest level, learning everyone's first name at the seminar on top of everything that he has going on there. It's a large group. He's trying to convey information at the highest level, and he's going to learn everyone's name again, which makes you more likable. I came back to that one in my head as I was kind of thinking out loud there. I didn't want to gloss over that, the importance of that. Craig, you talk about making a habit of pausing before you move into a space, which is, again, I think, just a life changing philosophy and habit. Can you teach us how to do that? How and why you do that?
I take that pause just because it's a centering. It allows me to be in the moment in that space. I'm not bringing anything with me from where I was at. I always take a pause. I always take a pause and try and it's a I can't remember if the word is zanshin or mushin, but there's a Japanese concept for present and take and pause before I transition into new space to be present in the moment. I think that's pretty critical, especially if you are interacting with people. I think that's really, really critical. Also, it allows me to focus on the space without the previous picture of the previous space in my head. So I think, you know, if I can take a pause before I move into a room that has to be cleared, of potential threats, taking that pause and not, and now sometimes you have to, like in a hostage rescue, you have to immediately blow through space. So you're not really in a hostage rescue, you're not even focusing on the space that you're in. You're supposed to focusing on the space that you're getting to. That's a pretty significant difference when you're trying to save. When time is the most critical aspect, that's a completely different thing. So this would be like the opposite of hostage rescue. This would be deliberate clearing of every single space that I enter. That's kind of, if I were going to use tactical language to describe
Mm.
how I kind of interact with space. It clears my head. It clears my head of what was and allows me to be in what is. I do take a pause. It's a slight pause, It may be just a little slowed. I may slow down a little bit, like I'm walking from uh, my car through a parking lot into a supermarket. Do I do that at the same pace? No. I'll typically pace down a little bit. I may shorten my stride. I may actually toggle my speed down a little bit. So I'm not at full stop, but in my mind, I'm transitioning. I'm preparing myself to enter new space. And I do that pretty consistently. Pretty consistently. It allows me to be, it's a practice that allows me to be more present and engaged with the environment.
Mm. That was the first thing that came to mind when you said that, when you describe it, presence, because you're one of the most present people I know, I would say. It just comes, you're always right here, right now. Um, and I think it allows you to make a great connection as well. Back to you talking about connecting with people, seeing and hearing people, listening to people. I think it allows you to make that great connection with so many people. Um, it's such a great cue for us to be more present as well. I think we need these behavioral cues as we enter a new space to just pause and let go what's behind us and just pay attention to what's in front of us, the situation, the human being. A friend and mentor of mine, Gannon Baker. He trained LeBron James and Kobe Bryant in basketball. He's trained 24 Hall of Fame athletes, WNBA and NBA. He says your presence is a present.
Yeah.
Your presence is a present, and when you take that pause to be more present, I think you're giving a gift to others, by being more present. Whether it's the students you're teaching, like Craig, or just people in his life, or people in all our lives. Try to get people take that pause, use that behavioral cue as you enter a space. Take the pause and know that you're giving people a present. I believe with your presence. Maybe we could shift back to what I would describe as three rules of survival. This is how I thought about it, and I thought this was so important the way you described this. In terms of self protection, and you know, a test for everyone listening. An expert makes the complex simple for us to understand and do. That's one of my tests of a true expert. A master makes the complex simple, and Craig does this so many times in his training. He makes the complex simple so we can understand it and do it. Not just understand it, but actually take action on it. And this is what, again, I would describe as three rules of survival. And Craig says the importance in self protection of staying conscious, staying upright, and be able to finish as fast as you can. To me, those are three just crucial rules. Again, through my own personal experience, and I just think the reality of violence. Um, how do we do that, Craig? I guess in a simple way. How do we stay conscious, stay upright, and be able to finish as fast as we can?
Well, ideally, we are the ones who make the first move. We seize initiative. We're not reacting to someone moving first. And there may be a single move made. You should be the person to make that move. Now, that comes down to being decisive and reading the moment as early as possible, accurately, as this is going to happen. This is going to happen. It can happen on my terms or it can happen on theirs, but it's going to happen. There's no way out of it. I can't rationalize it. I can't talk myself out of it. It's going to happen. So, you know, uh, how do you inculcate decisiveness in people? We have found that the best way to do that is experientially, whether they have a real big win or whether they have a real big loss in a simulation. Consequence seems to be the short track to improving decisiveness. That's what we've seen. So being decisive and making the first move, then I'm not going to have to be as concerned about staying upright and staying conscious. If I make the first move and I finish fast, if I do that, this can be done. Now, we don't always do that. Sometimes we are late, we're indecisive, we dither, to use the word of John Farnham. It's a great word, dithering. Um, I love John. He uses that. I think John turned 80 this year or something like that. Still out there teaching firearms.
Wow.
But yeah, it's one of his words. But what happens when we fail to initiate and he makes the first move? Well, we have to stay. The first thing we have to do before we do anything else is stay conscious and stay upright. The biggest part of staying upright is our posture that we develop generally through wrestling. And you don't have to be a combat sports to understand this. Essentially, what you want is a fairly straight line from the crown of your head to your tailbone that's slightly angled forward, and ideally a lower center of gravity than the person who's coming in. So if you just squat, squat like you would do a squat with a heavy bar on the back of your neck, you can squat ballistically, kind of like you'd see think about a lineman in football. You know how they kind of lower themselves quickly and prepare for impact. That's the stay upright part. And the stay conscious part would be an issue of using my hands to essentially create a helmet around my head and not try and pick off the incoming shot, reach for the unknown versus return to the known. I think cover theory generally works better than blocking or interception theory. That's what we found, especially with lay people that don't train, and this may be the only training they ever do, right? Uh, Dropping their weight and covering their head essentially is what they're doing. So it's a pretty simple plan. You're going to drop your weight and cover your head ballistically until the opportunity to finish or escape presents itself.
Oh, beautiful. And these are things, I mean, these are gross motor movements. These are simple skills that you can execute on under duress.
Yeah.
Um, I found that 100% true. I think blocking is almost a myth in self protection. Yeah, I've just found that personally. Even an experienced boxer or fighter, the unexpected. I mean, they're just not ready for it or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why, but if you can just cover and put that helmet on, I've always just found that accurate. I love your description of posture and dropping your body weight. Again, these are things that we can, you can practice every day through exercise, those movements. And also you can learn to do these things in an hour or less, um, which I think is so important, to be able to just, again, learn these things quickly and be able to apply them. In terms of finishing the fight fast, I know, I've heard you talk about, uh, big fan of boxing. If you could only pick two martial arts, it's probably boxing and wrestling. Bruce Lee said the same thing. He said, if someone wrestled and boxed for a year, they could defeat almost any martial artist.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee said that decades ago. Now it's a little more complicated than that, but overall, I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb, boxing and wrestling. In terms of finishing fights, finishing fast, um, rear naked choke, guillotine, power hook from your rear hand in terms of strikes. I know the eye jab you teach can be a great finisher that can stop someone in their tracks. What would you say in terms of finishing the fight? What are some of the things you would recommend? I mean, there's a lot, but
Yeah, definitely. So I think a standing finish that I initiate is preferred. So if I can finish standing, and that would be probably the eye jab into beating feet, the eye jab into presenting a weapon if that was warranted when I couldn't beat feet, or the eye jab into a heavy follow up. And honestly, a power hand, a rear hand straight across into the side of the neck, that's where I prefer punching people. I far prefer punching them in the side of the neck. It's a longer target, it's a softer target. I especially like doing bare knuckle stuff. When you turn, when you run this hand over a little bit, that kind of angled fist fits really well. If you've ever watched Thai boxing and you see a guy get a shin dropped on the side of his neck, that's that's pretty done. That's pretty final. I like the longer range shot as follow up to the eye jab, but the eye jab is the quickest, most non-telegraphic way to immediately take his vision. I tend to initiate with the eye jab, and that may be all I have to do. That may be all I have to do. That's my number one go-to. I've hit a lot of people with eye jabs in real time. In fact, I've hit so many people, I don't know how many people I've hit with eye
Mm.
jab. I've hit a bunch. That's just the benefit of, being a 90s era dope cop. We had all kinds of, you know, unwitting people offering themselves as training aides in, trailer parks and ghettos and housing projects, all the places we policed. So you get to see what works and what doesn't. And eye jabs worked always into a quick, you know, um, double leg takedown or a quick assisted takedown into a pair of handcuffs. Most guys that I hit with an eye jab didn't recover their vision before we had wrestled them into a pair of handcuffs. It kept them from bailing. It kept them from eye jabs kept me out of a number of foot pursuits that could go extended and turn into a worse fight or shooting. I think most people um, don't apply enough violence early enough when it's time to do it. That's
Right.
what I see in most like controversial current police use of force. When you actually look at the entire event, if they would have used any or a little bit more physical force earlier, it wouldn't have got that bad. It wouldn't have got to the shooting. So, um, yeah, standing finishes are my favorite. The eye jab and if I were gonna follow up, I'd like a strong rear cross, kind of a bare knuckle shot into the neck. And I really prefer to keep it standing if possible. That's my go-to. And as far as a finish, if I'm initiated on, um, probably a back take into some kind of way. Could be a trip, but a way to dump him without going down with him. That's tricky though. That's tricky. That's really tricky. I like tie-ups too, where I can bind two limbs together and have a free one to wail on somebody where they can't do that. That requires grappling to get there. We teach two in ShivWorks, the split seatbelt and the bundle. They're really effective. So those are probably my go-tos for standing unentangled, where I initiate, and then standing entangled, where I'm initiated upon.
I'll put a link to the eye jab in the show notes, a YouTube video, so you can know what Craig's talking about. Bruce Lee called it the Queen of Combat, the eye
Yeah.
jab, and what I found is those who you want to really listen to in self protection have two distinct backgrounds that they combine. One is sport martial arts. That's boxing, wrestling, jujitsu, mixed martial arts, some sort of sport competition martial arts where there's real contact. And then they combine that with real world empirical evidence, whether it's the undercover law enforcement work that Craig did, um, military close quarters combat work, even nightclub security work where they're dealing with violence on a regular basis. So if you're looking for a great self-protection instructor, I think those two backgrounds are crucial because in the sport end, you get to test things out in a non-life or death situation. In the reality based, real world violence, that you get to see empirically, well, does this sport stuff actually work? Can it be pressure tested in the worst type of scenarios? Um, and as Craig described, he used the eye jab more than any other technique, correct? All the other techniques combined, would you say that eye
Yeah.
jab was, oh, again, making the complex simple? What's the one thing I could do that'll make everything else either easier or unnecessary? As Gary Keller calls it, he calls it the focusing question. What's the one thing I could do that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And as Craig describes that eye jab, and it makes perfect sense to me. I use something called the physical fence that Jeff Thompson out of England developed. That was mine. That I use the physical fence more than anything else combined, which is essentially just an eye jab to the chest, although it could be to the eyes.
Yep.
That physical fence, it just works. Don't overcomplicate things. Learn something like the eye jab, which I think is the queen of combat. Um, and just rep it out over and over again because that can be a lifesaver in itself. Um, let's see. Uh, Greg, you talk about time management is probably the biggest thing you look for in a good instructor. Can you talk about practicing timeliness in all areas of our life? Can you give us some good timeliness tips? Because again, I think timeliness is just practicing excellence. It just displays excellence. What are some good things we could apply today in terms of time in our life? Things like, well, being on time or starting on time and ending on time. Things that you practice that could help us all.
I think the biggest thing is having a sense of how long something takes. That's the key to time management.
That's a
How
great
long is this
point.
going to take? And knowing that, specifically like when we teach, I know that when we start at 6 p.m. sharp, I do my introduction, my short introduction of myself and the weekend coming, the thumbnails. I toggle to the crowd and have them introduce themselves, tell me where they're from, a little bit about their pedigree as far as training goes and what they're looking to get out of the weekend. And we do that 20 times. I introduce Brian. I have them sit down, talk about the origin story for ShivWorks, get into the criminal assault paradigm, which is the framing of the problem, large, the big picture of criminal assault, and then get into which establishes the need for managing unknown contacts. And then we talk about how to do that. And then I say, all right, guys, any questions on what we're doing or how we're doing it? We have space, we have bodies. Let's stand up, pair up. I should be able to look at a clock on the wall or look at my watch, and it's 7:46 or 7:50. That's the time. The reason I know that is because I say the same single thing the same way every single time. So I know how much time it takes and I can dial it in to that level. So our wiggle for an 11-hour training day, or actually 10-hour training day with an hour for lunch, our wiggle is plus or minus 10 minutes. That's what we give ourselves. And if we missed that, then we did something awry. We did something, or something happened that went beyond our control. Maybe somebody got hurt. Maybe we had to get somebody to the hospital. Maybe somebody twisted their ankle or something like that. And we have to get that person out of class. And that caused a time suck. But anyway, we give ourselves plus or minus 10. So we can be 10 minutes early, we can be 10 minutes over. But if it's more or less than that, we didn't do something right. And the reason we can do that over, and we do that every weekend, and we rarely miss our time whack, is because we know exactly how long something takes because we do it constantly and we don't deviate from that. So that's what gives us our sense of time. So if you don't have a sense of time for how long something takes or sense of time for how long you take, it's hard to manage time. Managing time to me doesn't mean constantly looking at a phone or a watch. That's being beholden to time. That's not managing time. So I think having a sense of how long something takes and how long you take is important. Do you, and in theme, how do you convey information? Do you, to are you doing a Donald Trump weave? That's the weave. Fun, regardless of whether you like or hate that guy, that's funny that he has a specific way that he imparts information or how he eventually comes around to a point. If you're that guy, you know, it's going to take a while to get to the cogent message. Do you drive your messaging with brevity? You know, but having a sense of the thing or having a sense of yourself, I think that's the first part of managing time correctly and not being beholden to time.
Oh, never thought about it like that. No, never thought about it like that. And I think the way you put it, it's about knowing how long things are going to take. That's time management. So you can really apply that to every aspect of your life. Just knowing how long things are going to take and giving yourself that minimum effective dosage or maximum effective dosage, whatever that is, whatever you need for your health or your relationships or your work or the seminar you're in. I find people that who really take time as seriously as you do. It's another way to be highly respected, to really understand the importance of time. And also, the way you do it is in service of others, to really respect the people's time that come to you for training and to try to deliver every ounce of goodness you can in the time they have with you. Because it may only be one time at one seminar, and that may be the only time you have with them. And I know from your perspective, I know you're trying to deliver the absolute best of the best information to them so they have a paradigm shift and then they take action on it. So again, it's a way to practice excellence in service. And you're a great example of it, an excellent example. Craig, are there any books or documentaries that you would recommend to people in terms of personal success, personal development, and or also self-protection? Any biographies or books that you've gifted or recommended the most, or documentaries or TV shows that you love that that we can all learn from?
Most I typically watch things to on TV to kind of decompress and escape and lose time when I need to do that, when I need to be unintentional.
Smart.
That's how I tend to do it, is by reading and watching TV. So I don't read or watch film or TV or anything else generally to gain information. I tend to do that towards people, from directly from people. I think the most profound things that I've learned have come from people and being there with a person and experiencing. Most of my knowledge has been either directly from a person to me, observing a person in a particular circumstance, or experiencing something myself. I think my most profound learning has been directly observational or experiential. So can't really think of like something that I can direct people towards that is in a library or, I think there's some basics, meditations. I think by Marcus Aurelius, I think that's something solid that everyone can read. But I think that stuff just confirms and corroborates good experience. I think seeking connection with people, real connection. I think that's the key to learning. I learn every class. I learn something every single class. I have not stopped learning from people. And selfishly, that's one of the reasons I keep doing what I do because I'm still learning a lot. I still get surprised in class. It's rare, but I still get surprised in class. So it's fascinating. It's a fascinating human laboratory and human schoolhouse of constant learning. And that really is that's where that's those are my hallowed halls of knowledge and profound, profundity, I think that I've generally had those aha moments. I think they've always been with a person and in an experience. It's never been from anything I read or anything I watched. I know we'd all reading and watching stuff is convenient, it is, and seeking experience and connection with people is inconvenient and it's hard. But that's I just think it's a richer life. I really do, and I think the knowledge transfer is just so it's so more it's much more potent. It is.
Mm. Yeah, what a great perspective. What a great functional perspective there. I mean, from the connection point of view, just taking the time to connect with another person leads to a richer life. And also, uh, rather than learning from books or documentaries, going to the person. It just reminded me of a Japanese saying: "An hour with a wise person is better than 1,000 books."
Here's a really good one. Here's a really good one. Do you read about a psilocybin experience and do you actually understand what that's like versus actually taking the plant and really there's no there are some things like the initial descent, the ego death, the knowledge transfer and how that occurs depending on the plant. There's some things, okay, you can understand why, but you can't understand that particular plant medicine until you actually do it. And the difference between that experience and reading about it, it's simply you can't understand it until you actually do something like that. So I think the experiencing stuff, reading is great. It's awesome, but I just, man, most of my knowledge that I have and I've accumulated that's worthwhile, that's actionable, that I use, that came from people in person and an experience. It did.
Yeah, as you describe it, I mean, I've read quite a few books. I have to as part of my work,
Sure.
but I'm just thinking about as you describe it. It was my conversations with mentors that really, put my life in the best direction possible. Whether it was my career or just my life in general, that connection, and it just stuck better when you're hearing it from someone that you respect and admire.
Sure.
It just lands different. Someone who's 10 to 50 years ahead of you at where you want to be, whether it's in your health, your career, your relationships, your happiness, just having it just lands better, I think. I thought about that as you describe it. And also, there's more than one way to the top of the mountain. And I know people that are very successful that read a ton, listen to a ton, watch a ton. Warren Buffett reads 6 to 8 hours a day. There's others that are just voracious readers. And I also have people, and I know people that have gotten to the top of the mountain, and what they do by doing exactly as Craig describes it and really just going to the source. They may read a little bit, watch and listen to a little bit, but they're really source seekers. They go to people to learn. So figure out which one, or a combination of both is great, but figure out which one, you know, if you're listening, how do you get to the top of the mountain? How do you best learn? How do you want to learn? And figure out there's more than one way to the top of the mountain. There's more than one path. It's not right or wrong. It's what works best for you. Um, Craig, I am honored and I appreciate your time here. Uh, the work that you're doing, uh, I feel like it's 10 times better than pretty much everything else out there. And it reminds me of a philosophy that Peter Thiel has. And I don't agree with everything Peter says in life, but I think that he has some really good things to say on a lot of different things. Um, and he talks about how don't just try to be 10% better. You have to try to be 10 times better at whatever you're doing. Try to be 10 times better. And I really look at my whole life through that lens. I'm always looking for what is 10 times better subjectively, whether it's who knows more about leadership, the best restaurant I could go to, who knows more about happiness, whatever it is I want to get better at, who knows more about health, someone like Peter Attia, who's 10 times better. Peter Attia is a good example probably of a 10 times better subject matter expert. And he got there by going and studying with the best in the world in all types of different disciplines to be 10 times better. And I think your work exemplifies that 10 times better philosophy. I really think it is 10 times better than what's next there. And I challenge everyone listening, try to figure out who's 10 times better at whatever you want to learn at and get better at, and go learn from them. Really figure out who's that one person or the one book or the one expert, who's 10 times better, and really go to them. It'll save you quite a bit of time getting to the top of the mountain. And also try to be 10 times better yourself. How can I be a 10 times better husband, father, teacher, boss, mechanic, school teacher, law enforcement officer? How can I be that 10 times better person? How can I practice excellence and service at that level that is 10 times better? Jerry Seinfeld talks about this. He did this great interview for GQ. And Jerry Seinfeld's just a prolific joke writer. He is maybe that 10 times better person in his field, in his craft. And he talks about the one thread that runs through his entire life is quality, right? Quality. Try to deliver everything with quality, that excellence in service, be 10 times better. Try to train with Craig. I mean, Craig's booked pretty well. World-renowned instructor, but try to train with Craig and do some work with him, not just to be better at self-protection, but also to live a better life in general. I know you're going to meet some really great people when you train with Craig. You're not just going to learn this great life skill of self-protection, but you're also going to come out and have a better life in terms of your health, your relationships, and I believe a better career, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. Craig, where can people find you and your work?
So the website is ShivWorks.com. That has the training schedule, that has all our social media. We have a YouTube channel, ShivWorks. We have Facebook, pretty big at this point. I think we have like 100,000 people in that group. Ron's built it up well. ShivWorks and alumni, and then the ShivWorks official IG page. That's us too. So we're pretty easy to find. We're pretty easy to find. If you just remember ShivWorks and Google that, you'll land on us. You will.
Yeah, your social media is outstanding. When you look Craig up, you'll get a real understanding. It's hard for me to describe it. You need to watch some videos. You need to go to the Instagram. You need to go to the YouTube channel and really see what Craig's work is all about, and you'll instantly know that it's 10 times better. You will just instantly understand. So I'll put some links to ShivWorks YouTube in the notes here, as well as the Hard to Hurt videos, Warrior Poet. So, I challenge everyone to watch it, and really understand it. Again, I'll also put a link to the Managing Unknown Contacts online course, which if you do anything, just watch that and practice that. Again, that can save your life as well as something you could teach to your kids as well in terms of saving their life. I think it's that. I don't think I know it's that important. So again, Craig, honored. Thank you for the interview. Proud to know you and call you a friend. I really respect and admire what you're doing with ShivWorks, is also how you live your life. So I appreciate you.
AJ, thank you, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to someone that is as engaged as I am, and also somebody that can obviously bring out the best in me. So I appreciate that opportunity, and it's awesome to connect your audience. I look forward to working with you again, sir.
Thank you, sir. Honored, honored. Looking forward to the next conversation.